method acting. You only ever see people doing the method when they're playing an asshole.
Is method acting just a load of old nonsense? Mila Kunis definitely thought so when her husband Ashton Kutcher got sent to the hospital after drinking too much carrot juice for the movie Jobs, calling him
so stupid
and
he was so dumb.
And then there's Jared Leto, who sent condoms to Margot Robbie for a performance that got critically panned. So what is method acting? How did it start? And how did we get to the point where actors destroy themselves and everything around them to play dress up? And is it just self-indulgent bullshit?
But it was the most self-aggrandizing, selfish, narcissistic I've ever seen.
The origin story of method acting comes from Konstantin Stanislavski, a Russian actor, director, and theatre practitioner. He must have been good at pretending to be somebody else, as he changed his real name, Alexeyev, to separate his theatrical pursuits and his wealthy industrial family. Around the turn of the 20th century, he laid the foundation for modern acting techniques, but this didn't include starving yourself or pissing off your co-stars. Instead, he wanted to move away from the artificial, exaggerated acting style that was popular at the time. Think Tommy Wiseau in The Room only 120 years ago. He aimed to create performances that were truthful, emotionally resonant, and grounded in human experience. His innovations were driven by his desire to explore the psychology of characters and to understand how actors could fully immerse themselves in their roles. His system, imaginatively named as the Stanislavski system, had 6 things he wanted actors to focus on. Given circumstances, understand the script's facts and context to ground the character.
Didn't you notice a powerful and obnoxious odor of mendacity in this room?
The magic if, imagine yourself in the character's situation to promote authenticity.
Hey, Stella!
Objective, identify what the character wants in each scene.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Actions and tactics, choose actions to pursue the character's goals.
It's gone.
Emotional memory, draw on personal experiences or imagination to evoke genuine emotions.
I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my boy!
Subtext, convey the unspoken thoughts and feelings behind the character's words.
You up. You are an empty, hollow shell of a woman!
In contrast, Ashton Kutcher's method was a little more unorthodox and one-dimensional. When he set out to play Steve Jobs in the Steve Jobs movie, which wasn't as good as the other Steve Jobs movie, Jobs. After he got the role, he wanted to do absolutely everything that he could to get into character. Everything apart from, apparently, acting. One of those things was to embrace Jobs' reported fruitarian diet, a diet that is basically competitive veganism, where you eat mostly fruit, nuts, and seeds. People told Kutcher that Jobs drank so much carrot juice he always had an orange colour to his skin. So he took this to mean that he should drink carrot juice non-stop, all day long, and nothing else. Turns out having nothing but a carrot diet only works for Bugs Bunny because Kutcher experienced a ton of pain and was hospitalised. The diagnosis?
Crazy pancreatitis.
It's one thing getting pancreatitis, it's another going crazy at the same time. Stanislavski wanted actors to live the part, but not go that far. And throughout this video, we'll go into how this system has been bastardized to create a kind of zombie method. Instead, the OG of the method did things like set himself experiments where he would be disguised as a gypsy or a homeless person and walk around in character, before it was cool. In 1909, Stanislavski produced the first draft of his system of method acting. This led to the manual An Actor's Work, published in 1938, and the first drama school in the UK to teach an approach to acting based on Stanislavski's system was Drama Centre London, where it's still taught today. But the Russian only laid the groundwork for method acting. Someone else would come along and build upon that, and then Hollywood would come along and burn that house to the ground. When the Moscow Art Theatre appeared on Broadway in 1923, inspired by Stanislavski's teachings, the response was as well received as a calorie during a Christian Bale diet. In place of the usual egocentric, over-the-top star acting that Americans had become used to,
frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Stanislavski's company performed as a group that seemed to be living their roles. 2 members of the troupe stayed behind, and at the American Laboratory Theatre, they began to instruct American actors in the principles of the Stanislavski system. 3 people who were particularly keen on it were 3 young theatre enthusiasts: director Harold Clurman, actor-director Lee Strasberg, and producer Cheryl Crawford. In 1931, they co-founded the group theatre, and the purpose of it was to take hand-picked actors and trained them on a version of the Stanislavski system. The group theatre wasn't the best name for the founders because they really liked an argument. In particular, Strasberg, a remote bookish man with a deadpan expression, and Adler, the cliched theatrical type. They went along with type, as Strasberg pushed actors to go inward to examine their own lives, while Adler urged the students to get out of themselves and develop their imaginations. After studying with Stanislavski in Paris, Adler announced to Strasberg in front of the group that they were mangling the master's system, which didn't exactly promote workplace harmony. Doubling down 48 years later, on the day of her rival's death, Adler announced to her class that it will take 100 years for the American theatre to recover from the damage that man has caused. She wasn't far wrong, but even she couldn't have seen the extremes that Strasberg's method and her version of it would go to, damaging more than just the theatre. Things that actually matter as well, like people. For example, Jared Leto, for 2022's monster flop Morbius, refused to break character and insisted on limping along in crutches. His 45-minute-long bathroom breaks cost the whole crew a huge amount of time and money. Eventually, the producers got so annoyed with the millionaire that they struck a deal with him that he could use a wheelchair to go to the toilet. His result for all this pointless effort? A rating on Rotten Tomatoes of 15%. But that wasn't the worst thing that Leto did on set as part of his method. Remember that condom that I mentioned earlier in the video that he sent Margot Robbie? Well, we'll be looking at more horrific gifts he sent his co-stars on the set of Suicide Squad. And there's a lot. None of this kind of thing was taught by Strasberg. At the heart of his work and his training of the company was the use of effective memory, which encouraged the actors to recapture and relive a singular once-in-a-lifetime type of event from his or her past, and to use those truthful feelings to rise to an explosive moment, at will, in a scene. Or in other words, acting. According to Isaac Butler, author of The Method, How the 20th Century Learned to Act, Strasberg got accused of practicing unlicensed psychotherapy. If you've seen the Netflix film Blonde, you'll see why. In it, Marilyn Monroe is seen weeping on the floor as she remembers her own childhood trauma in an acting class. Monroe studied under Strasberg. That's the method in action.
She was one of the 2 or 3 most sensitive and most talented people that I've seen in my life.
But then again, it's at this point that the method itself becomes a little bit muddled. The birth of modern method is often cited as Marlon Brando's performance in A Streetcar Named Desire. As well as proclaiming his love for the lager Stella Artois,
Hey, Stella!
he also made a name for himself with an amazing performance, apparently living and breathing every part of his character. Although Brando studied at the group theatre, it was actually Stella Adler, or should I say,
Stella!
Adler, the woman who hated Strasberg, who taught the young Brando. As Butler says in his book, Adler's methodology was more based around textual analysis and imagination and mastering the behaviours of the character. So rather than access your own memories to inhabit a character, you would learn everything your character knew until you knew it as deeply. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because it's this technique which actors jumped on, took to more and more extreme lengths, and lodged itself in audiences' psyches as being method. So there's a crossroads here, between Strasberg's actual method involving memory and Adler's lived experience technique. Both persisted, but only one would end up with actors taking things way too far. From the 1970s onwards, anything that was seen as immersive was called method. These were performances that were seen as some of the best ever on screen, from the likes of Robert De Niro, Meryl Streep, Dustin Hoffman, and Al Pacino. For Taxi Driver, De Niro learned to drive a cab and worked 12-hour shifts as a New York City taxi driver for a month leading up to filming. He lost 30 to 35 pounds for the role, spent time with members of the US Army base to learn their accents and mannerisms, took firearms training, listened to diaries from assassins, and stalked his own autograph hunters to understand their psychology. Thankfully, he stopped short of really shooting up a brothel. All of these undoubtedly helped him with his iconic performance of Travis Bickle and led to acclaim, but this kind of immersion wasn't everyone's cup of tea. For his role in Marathon Man, Dustin Hoffman famously stayed awake all night and ran before scenes to be convincingly exhausted. His co-star and classically trained actor Laurence Olivier just as famously told him to "Try acting, dear boy." Acclaim was matched with criticism in equal measure during the golden age of these more modern versions of method performances. The criticism wasn't going to stop there, and it wasn't going to be exclusively for actors either. Fast forward to 2004, and Jamie Foxx in Ray. Foxx was pushed into method acting as Ray Charles for the role by director Taylor Hackford, who's a strong believer of the technique. Fox already played the piano, but the director insisted that the star's eyes were glued shut and covered with prosthetics that resembled Charles's real eyelids. Fox felt so claustrophobic during the first 2 weeks of filming that he suffered from panic attacks. Not only that, but the cast and crew constantly forgot that Fox couldn't see, once leaving him stranded at a lunch table. In the words of the leading man, "Imagine having your eyes glued shut for 14 hours a day." Fox went on to say, "That's your jail sentence." The performance earned him an Oscar for Best Actor, but was it worth it? Extreme lengths like these were just the tip of the iceberg as acting became more and more ridiculous throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. Once actors had seen how successful full immersion could be, they all started to try and outdo each other with the lengths that they went to. This meant the husbands and wives of Hollywood started to question whether living in a mansion was really worth it. Remember Isaac Butler, the method expert from earlier? He says, if you're the kind of person prone to power plays and difficult behaviour, the method is a pretty ready-made excuse. And there are few professions more prime for that than acting. Cue some of the most extreme cases of actors taking things too far and the unbelievable stories from their co-stars. Daniel Day-Lewis could have a video all on his own for this one. For The Crucible, he arrived on the island where the movie was going to be shot and lived there as a farmer for 2 months before the cameras even started to roll. In The Unbearable Lightness of Being, he played a Czechoslovakian brain surgeon, so of course, he learnt brain surgery. He learnt to speak the language fluently. In The Name of the Father, he was a wrongfully convicted bomber during the Irish Troubles, and what better way of experiencing that than by spending 3 days in solitary confinement without any water and forcing the crew to throw cold water over him whenever they saw him. He spent a whole month in the wilderness for Last of the Mohicans, learning to hunt and skin animals, fight with tomahawks, and run with a 12-pound flintlock gun. And we've only just got started. For My Left Foot, he studied people in a cerebral palsy clinic and stayed in character for the entire shoot, with the crew feeding him and lifting him in and out of his wheelchair. He caught pneumonia filming Gangs of New York, as he refused to wear a modern coat, then he refused modern medicine and almost died. He spent 2 years learning how to make dresses for Phantom Thread, and slightly more disturbing than that, he learned how to touch his fake glass lens for his eye with a knife without blinking as Bill the Butcher. He's the kind of bloke that if you said jump, he'd say, "Hang on, I've just got to get my jumping PhD from the University of Height." But crucially, Day-Lewis is known for his amazing performances, and is the only actor to have won 3 Oscars. So for him, this form of method pays off, and at least can be seen as worth it.
What in heaven's name are you talking about?
That's definitely not the case for a lot of other performances. Jim Carrey as Andy Kaufman is one of these. His offstage antics were so bizarre that Universal withheld the behind-the-scenes footage of Man on the Moon for 20 years, so that people didn't end up hating Carrey. Netflix then made a whole documentary about it called When Jim Met Andy, which goes into great detail about what happens when an actor stays in character for a full shoot, and the chaos it can cause everyone around the production. His co-star, Paul Giamatti, said,
"Whenever he was Tony Clifton, it was particularly mayhem off the set."
His behaviour often frustrated the cast and crew, and Carey caused delays and chaos by refusing to cooperate or follow directions, mirroring the way Kaufman often provoked those around him. But Carey took things one step further. Kaufman famously feuded with wrestler Jerry Lawler, but this was all staged. Jim, however, really antagonised Lawler to the point of physical confrontations, and the ex-wrestler later revealed that he found Carey's behaviour unnecessarily combative. A mixed reaction to his performance is an understatement. At the time, the movie itself got mediocre reviews, even if Carey himself won a Golden Globe. Since the documentary was released, some people have praised the dedication to the role, but others, like fellow actor Martin Freeman, had this to say.
But it was the most self-aggrandizing, selfish, narcissistic I've ever seen.
Is this kind of acting narcissistic? And is it even method acting at all, or something completely different? The modern era has brought us full circle and has shown us how method acting has clearly split off into 2 clear directions, started by the feud between Strasberg and Adler back in the mid-20th century. If the full immersion extreme method was becoming a competition to be the biggest belligerent extremist throughout the 90s and early 2000s, then Christian Bale is a candidate for the gold medal, especially if you're focusing on physical transformations. He shed over 25 kilograms in 4 months to play insomniac industrial worker Trevor Resnick. His diet? Black coffee, whiskey, and a solitary apple, and a tin of tuna every day, or 200 calories. Add to that only 2 hours of sleep each night. The 54-kilogram final weight Bale eventually reached wasn't enough for him. He wanted to cut down to just 45 kilograms, but the film's producers stopped him for health reasons. Those reasons presumably being death. This was another great performance, but would it have been just as good without going so far? Olivia Colman in The Lost Daughter, for example. She plays a middle-aged woman on vacation on a Greek island with a past as a young mother. Colman has never studied the method and has never suggested that she immerses herself in unusual ways, but her naturalistic performance is exactly the style the original Strasberg method was meant to achieve. This performance received rave reviews, and she didn't need to lose most of her body weight, spend 9 months actually having a baby, or learn how to speak Greek. The Adler method of living and breathing the character, which Marlon Brando popularized in Streetcar, has been pushed further and further, coming to a head with Jared Leto in Suicide Squad. This performance didn't receive rave reviews. What was received was a lot of criticism, and in the case of Leto's co-stars, a lot of unwanted gifts from the Joker. Viola Davis has said that during rehearsals, Leto's henchman
came in with a dead pig and plopped it on the table, and then he walked out. And that was our introduction into Jared Leto.
To Margot Robbie, he sent a live rat, and if that wasn't enough, it was followed by an unwrapped condom. Killer Croc actor Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje got mysteriously sticky copies of Playboy as an unwanted Christmas present, and Will Smith, some bullets in the mail. In any other context, this sort of stuff would have been reported to the police, but because Leto was going method, then it was fine. How long before an actor ends a member of the public and explains that he was researching for a role? For all Leto's antics, it definitely wasn't worth it. The movie was panned, his performance was seen as the worst portrayal of the Joker of all time, and this is often cited as the time modern method went too far, potentially killing it altogether.
I am not someone who is loved. I'm an idea.
The original practice of method acting is still being studied. The Actors Studio in New York, where Lee Strasberg taught, is still going. Ellen Burstyn of The Exorcist fame is its co-president. She still believes in the method, which she sums up as training the imagination to respond to imaginary circumstances. Actors Louise Brealey from Sherlock and British Academy TV Award winner Adil Akhtar have both studied it. Brealey says that she's found it valuable as a tool, but sums it up nicely when saying, "I think when method goes wrong is when that ability to laugh at yourself is absent." Like Martin Freeman, Akhtar agrees that the whole idea of actors staying in character throughout a shoot is a bit indulgent, joking, "I don't think my wife would let me," and has said, "My kids pathologically can't let me because they have their needs." So is method acting destructive bullshit?